let's have a look at where we are so far. So we've imported the turtle module, bringing this book from the library so that we can use the commands inside anything to do with turtles. Then we've created two turtles for the Mary, we've changed their shape, changed their color, made Mary turn left by 180 so that the two turtles are facing opposite directions. Then we created this switch, this variable that contains a boolean. We also call it a flag, a boolean flag, because it's flagging to the code whether to do a loop or not do a loop in this case. And then we have our while loop. The while loop says, repeat the following chunk of code, the code that will come after the colon, which has at least one indent. I'll come back to this in a bit. Repeat the following chunk of code until, for as long as carry on is true. And the moment carry on is false, stop repeating. And the colon is how we're going to say, this is the code I want to repeat. We'll look at anything that has one or more indents. So all of those lines have at least one indent, and they may have more, we'll see why in a bit. Line 26 doesn't, so it's not part of the loop. So lines 16 to 24 are the while loop. They're the block of code that we keep repeating until something happens. Here we can remove this again by putting the hash symbol in front of it, so this makes it a comment. Then we have a decision. We're asking the computer to make a decision for us. This is not a decision that I have to make as a programmer. I am letting the computer program make this decision for me. That's what an if statement does. And we're saying if Fred's position is 100 or Mary's position is 100, minus 100, whichever one of those happens, if that happens, run these two lines of code. And that's where we have another colon with another block. So notice we have this block of code is part of the if block, which is part of the while block. That's why it has two bits of indents, there and there. And you can see that little line there showing us visually these indents. However, if neither Fred has reached 100 nor Mary has reached minus 100, then I want you to print carry on as usual. And we're moving Fred forward and back and Mary forward by 5 steps and 2 steps. These lines could be anywhere, right? I could have them in the beginning, in the end, it doesn't really matter because the while loop is a loop, so it keeps looping. So it doesn't matter too much where I move them forward. But if you prefer, we can move them forward first thing in the loop. It seems neater to do it that way. Good. Now, there are a few things we don't like to do that I have done so far in here. And this is using specific numbers deep in within my code. For example, here I have Fred's speed. Fred is moving by 5 steps every time, Mary by 2. And the endpoint for Fred and Mary. Why? Because what if I want to change this later on? Of course, I could come here and change that number. But often these numbers, we'll use them more than once in our code. And we don't like to have to go and look for these numbers that we want to change. So what we tend to do is we tend to create them as variables before. Let's see what we mean here. I could go at the top and say Fred's speed is equal to 5 rather, and Mary's speed is equal to 2. So I've created 2 variables. Notice that I'm using the word Fred and Mary there, but these are just new names, new labels. In the same way that score equals 0 in the examples I've given before. And I could also have finish line equals 100. Putting in a number. What if I then wanted to go further? I can simply change this to 200. Let's go and make changes in our code now. First, Fred.forward. I no longer need to type in 5 there. I shouldn't hard code the number 5. Instead, I can say Fred speed. And now, whenever I want to make Fred go faster or slower, all I have to do is change that number. Same thing with Mary.forward. I can use the label Mary speed, which means that Python will look what are the contents of Mary's speed at the moment. At the moment, they're going to be 2. And then I can say if Fred.xscore equals finish line, and Mary.xscore equals minus finish line. Whatever finish line is, put a minus. So this will work in exactly the same way as it did before. But now, if I want to change any of these, for example, if I want the finish line to be 200, so twice as far, and I want Fred to go 2 and Mary speed 10, this works. Brilliant. Now, I have a problem in my code at the moment, but we've been lucky enough not to notice this problem. I'll come back to it in a bit. Let us make the following change. I would like that every time I run this animation, Fred's speed and Mary's speed are random numbers. At the moment, I'm having to type in the speed, right? Fred is moving by 2 steps every time, Mary by 10 steps every time. So Mary is going faster than Fred. I want these numbers to be random. And in Python, we have a way of dealing with random numbers, like we have a way of dealing with almost everything. Python is one of the broadest languages. It has tools to deal with everything. Where am I going to find these tools? Remember the library we went to? So far, we went to the library to fetch the turtle book, the book with commands to create turtles, make them move forward, change their shape to a turtle. We can also, from the same library, if you like, from the same place where Python keeps all of these things, bring in another module, another book, if you like, called random. And you can guess what's inside this book. It's commands to deal with random things. And for the time being, and then we'll review the tool, I'm simply going to change this. And I'm going to say, instead of 2, I would like, from the random book that I just brought from the library, random is just a module. So I need to, from within it, fetch a command. And then I'm going to use a command called randint, which stands for random integer. An integer is a whole number, right? So it's a random whole number. Parentheses, remember what the parentheses do. Do this command and do it now. But randint needs some information in the brackets, just like forward needed a number or left needed a number, an angle. Randint needs 2 numbers. The range, where should I choose my random number from? Python is asking me. Give me the minimum and the maximum. For example, 1,8. So give me any number between 1 and 8. And I'm going to do the same thing for Mary. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Mary's speed is also equal to random.randint 1,8. Let us check what these are. So print Fred's speed and Mary's speed, just in case we need them. And let's run the code and see what's going to happen. Good. This has worked. What's wrong with that? Let's have a look. We have Fred's speed was 4, Mary's speed was 6. They kept going until Mary, in this case, reached the end, which is 200 first. Brilliant. Let me run it again. It works. No problem whatsoever. And again. Should we go for one more time? Did you notice something there? It did stop, but it should have stopped when Mary reached minus 200. We have a bug. It did stop eventually, but we wanted it to stop when the first of these turtles reaches the end. In fact, let me change the values a bit. Remember, every time we're running it is random here, so I can never predict what's going to happen. But let me say that I want to change these speeds from between 1 and 20. So now they could go even faster. It did work in this case. Brilliant. Let's try again. Still going. And you see that the code is still running. Fred and Mary, neither of them triggered the stop. We have a bug. A bug is when our code doesn't quite give us an error. You could see it was still working and running, but it didn't do what we expected to do. Now, later on in future courses, we'll talk a lot in more detail about debugging, the process of finding bugs and fixing them. For the time being, we'll do a briefer study of what's going on here. We'll have a look in the next video.